What is going on, GBA? I am the Confusion, and we are here, me and Spastic, to bring you week 4 of the weekly recap. Spastic, you are finally back. Say hi.
Hello, one and all. Yeah, sorry about that. Real life got in the way of last week, but big shout out to Burke for stepping in. He did a great spastic impersonation, I tell you.
Agreed. He's great fun, but I'm happy to have you back here. So
Yay!
matter of fact, this week is definitely like my top week I've had in the GBA. Like I've enjoyed watching and analyzing this week's games more than any, and I hope you guys will agree because there are games from every dimension. We have a sweep, we have a timer stall, we have great battles here. So jumping into the first one, an amazing match from Dan and Tup, the St. Louis Rampardos, up against the Pittsburgh Piratas. Dan's bringing Gliscor, Staraptor, Victini, Toxapex, Steelix, and Golisopod, and Tup is bringing the Nidoking, the Tapu Koko, the Hydreigon, Tangrowth, Slowking, and the Scizor. Okay, so the something I found really interesting just by looking at the team matchup and the team builders is that Dan brought a completely physically offensive team. The Steelix, the Golisopod, even the Victini and Staraptor, and the Gliscor. Barring the Toxapex, his team is very physically offensive. And when I looked at Tup's team, his team is so physically defensive with Pokemon like Tangrowth and Iron Defense Slowking, even Pokemon that are just generally more physically defensive like Scizor and Hydreigon. So I found that really interesting from the beginning to see such a physically offensive team up against such a physically defensive team. But jumping into the game itself, with the help of Dan's amazing prediction skill and he was just really able to whittle down Tup's team, especially the Nidoking, the Hydreigon, and the Scizor. Again, Nidoking came in, put up rocks, wasn't able to do much, but it was really just Dan being able to predict a lot of Tup's move. One I found especially important is the Z move on the Hydreigon. Tup was going for a Z Earth Power on the Toxapex to try to get that thing out of the way because it was such a nuisance to his team, which it was, we'll talk about. But it turns out Dan not really predicted that, but was able to go into Gliscor and completely avoid that Z move. And that really put Tup on the backhand. Losing that Z move was really essential. His Hydreigon had a little bit more trouble breaking through that Toxapex after that. Toxapex was able to spread Toxics. It got a Scald burn on the Nidoking. So it was really annoying. And as Dan was able to predict, the coverage moves, Tup really was, falling behind. The one thing I would say Tup was able to take advantage of is setting up the rocks. Dan has an incredible Stealth Rock weakness, with half his team really being weak to Stealth Rocks, and 2 of those Pokemon having Recoil in either a Life Orb or Recoil moves like Brave Bird and Double Edge. So setting up rocks I thought was a very smart play, and we'll see how that ends up turning out as we keep going. But the thing is, Dan brought in those rock-weak Pokemon at just the right times. Victini first comes in and just blasts the Tangrowth out of the water. It brings the Slowking really low and gets a para with the Bolt Strike, which of course we're going to talk about later. That para really changed the game. But it also was able to kill off the Hydreigon, albeit that Hydreigon was able to kill the Victini as it died, so Hydreigon was able to get rid of that threat, but another threat was in the back in Staraptor, which is going to be able to clean up that game. Some other things I want to mention is the Steelix being such a great switch into Tapu Koko. Tup really had a lot of trouble maneuvering around his team. And I don't think because he had a bad team matchup, but just because his Pokemon, he really couldn't predict around Dan's prediction skill. I thought he was doing really well that match. But yeah, towards the end of the game, the Slowking getting paralyzed, you could say it helped him, you could say it didn't. It's really interesting because the way that para worked is although it avoided him from getting toxic, and that made it so that Slowking could really 1v1 Dan's team, getting para so many times, the actual hacks itself caused him to lose in the end, and Staraptor was able to clean up with Double Edge. The one thing I would say that I wish Tup did a little differently is when the Staraptor was up against the Tapu Koko and knocked it out with a Double Edge, I really think he should have went into the Scizor instead of the Slowking. Scizor could have clicked Bullet Punch, and the combination of a Banded Bullet Punch and the recoil damage would have knocked that thing out, and it couldn't switch out because of the rocks damage. So I really think that preserving the Slowking would have been a better choice, but hey, hindsight's 2020. He could have switched out one more time and brought it in at the right time. So I still think it was a really, really awesome match. Props to Dan getting that 3-0, but it was such a close match. I really, really thought it was anyone's game, but Dan and his prediction skills were able to take that 3-0.
I really liked the Fire Fang on Gliscor because it actually did come in real handy against the Scizor, just threatening it out and making sure that it minimized the damage that it could do to Dan's team. Also, Victini V-creating all sorts of problems for Tup's team with just its strength, its power. Just V-create is a really strong move. Dan is really good and really comfortable with Victini, so he knows exactly when to use it. Tup's Slow King set, I really did like it, and I hate that it didn't get to do as much as I think Tup would have wanted. Although the paralysis did come in handy, especially when well, not really handy so much as it threw Dan off, because he seemed to forget that it was paralyzed when he went for the toxic on it, and it almost cost him a lot of momentum. It almost cost him the game, but in the end, Staraptor managed to turn it around for him, and it was a pretty out there game, pretty straight balls to the walls. But one game that wasn't so ballsy was the San Jose Sharpedos versus the Alolan Athletic. Oh boy, let me talk about this game. Callum bringing Excadrill, Tyranitar, Rotom Wash, Shaman, Emboar, and Sableye, with Tom bringing Celesteela, Thundurus Therian, Nidoqueen, Vaporeon, Hitmonlee, and Gardevoir. Oh boy, this match. Alright, so there were a lot of really good switches from both coaches. Nidoqueen putting on a lot of defensive pressure. Rotom Wash being irritating like it always does. Shaman with the Leech Seed. Really liking to target that Celesteela. Callum really noting when Celesteela comes in and getting a really nice two really nice Leech Seeds off, which means Rotom Wash could get a lot of health back. Even Shaman could get some health back. Celesteela having such a high enough HP stat to make it really worthwhile. We didn't see a whole lot of the sand dynamic with T-Tar and Excadrill, but they were still putting on a lot of pressure nonetheless. Gardevoir. Gardevoir, tracing Prankster not once, but twice, and managing to get a Prankster sub. Really nice, although it didn't seem to matter a whole lot given how the switches worked out. But the fact that this game was a timeout, both coaches really taking their time, really thinking these moves through. I'm usually not a fan of timeouts, but the fact that both coaches were really putting strategy into this and switching out so much. There were a lot of switches in this game. Like, what do you say?
Yeah, I'm also not a big fan of the timeouts. I know there was a lot of controversy whether Callum thought Tom was trying to stall him out, so he was playing for the timer, or Tom thought that Callum was trying to stall him out and he was playing for the timer. So either way, whichever way you look at it, whichever way you support, I think a timer is a legitimate way to win. Although it's not the most fun way to win, and, technically you didn't defeat the other person's team, it's still a legitimate way to win. And if someone is playing for the timer, that's not necessarily something you have to scold at or be upset at. It's just it's a strategy. It's a way of winning. It's a way to get to the end. And in such a competitive league, if that's how you're going to get there, if they realize 30 minutes in, no Pokemon got a kill yet, this is probably going to be a battle that goes down to the timer. They both had incredible walls. Celesteela being an Assault Vest and Nidoqueen, it was a lot of bulk on both sides. So I just think my one input here is don't get so upset just because it went down to the timer. It is a legitimate way to win. It's not a fun way to win. I'm sure as much as we don't want to see that kind of play style, they as competitors don't want to play that way either. They would like to defeat their opponent. But if that is what they have to do one week, we have seen this already season 7, so nothing crazy, but yeah, it is something that happens. Obviously it doesn't happen every week, so I think take it with a grain of salt. And let's just move into the next match, which is the San Diego Team Chargers up against the San Francisco Giants. MV bringing his Landorus T, his Alolan Muck, the Alakazam, Empoleon, that Magnezone, and the Virizion, while the Giants and Geo is bringing Bronzong, Tapu Fini, Gengar, Rhyperior, Conkeldurr, and Heliolisk. Now, looking at the dynamics of this team, it looks very similar, in my opinion, to the dynamics of Crimson's team, in the sense that he has Magnezone the same way that Chase had the Magneton, and he has Virizion in the same sense that Chase had the Cobalion. Now, I know those are very different Pokemon, but they're also similar in the sense that they perform the same role towards Geo's team, and we're going to really see how that ends up taking place. Now, right off the bat, we have that Bronzong setting up the Trick Room and exploding. Now, I don't know what the obsession with bringing Trick Room towards MV's team is. I guess it makes sense because of his reign. And I kind of agreed with, Trick Room in this case, but it didn't really work out for him. When you look at the team matchup, Conkeldurr and Rhyperior had coverage for everything, and I mean everything on MV's team, barring probably the Alakazam, but it's pretty frail. So under a Trick Room, those 140 base power Pokemon really could have ripped holds, but unfortunately, MV was not playing to predict. His Magnezone stayed in on both the Rhyperior and the Conkeldurr, two Pokemon that could have knocked it out. If Rhyperior went for the Earthquake round 1 that first turn, it would have knocked out the Magnezone. If Conkeldurr went for the Drain Punch instead of the Ice Punch, it would have knocked out the Magnezone. The only issue is, Geo was being smart. He was predicting, and MV was like, nah, not gonna predict. Just gonna stay in. He said he only had it there for the Bronzong, and because it exploded turn 1, he didn't find really much use for it, so he was going to let go of it. That, my friends, ended up costing Geo a lot. A lot on his Rhyperior, his Conkeldurr, and a lot on his Gengar as he switched that in. But eventually, once the Magnezone is gone, we have Tapu Fini coming in. It has the Nature's Madness, so Empoleon isn't really there to wall it. After, I think, 2 Nature's Madnesses, or 1, it is able to Moonblast and kill the Empoleon. But after that, he just is able to send in that Virizion and just start getting kills. Virizion Leaf Blades the Tapu Fini, that thing is gone. It's just a lot of pressure on Geo's team. He doesn't have much. The Gengar got trapped by the Alolan Muck. Virizion, in the end, was able to sweep up. So it's really a hard game to look at, just because we've seen Geo fall to the same traps every week. And although he has picked up a ground type, he's learning, he understands his weaknesses. I think he just picked up a Mungus. He really does need to just do a little better in that sense. He needs to find what his team is there to do, because right now it seems that opponents are really able to take advantage of his team, and looking at it, Geo has a good team. I really want to see him do well with this team, but some things are just not working out, and I'm just hoping and praying he's going to be able to figure it out and fix that. But MV played a really good game. In my opinion, Geo played a good game too. He was very focused. You saw it in his commentary. He was really trying to make some good predictions and get back in that game. It just didn't end up working out. But what do you think of that, Spastic?
I think Envy did a really good job with stalling out both instances of Trick Room, because he knew that could really cause problems with Conkeldurr and Rhyperior, and Rhyperior did causing problems with Trick Room up. It was, by the way, with Tapu Fini, it was 2 Nature's Madnesses taking down Empoleon before he could Moonblast it. But putting Trick Room on Gengar, a Fastmon, setting up a Trick Room, a very potential double-edged sword, but he ended up making it work. I was happy to see that it worked out for him as much as it did. Granted, it didn't win him the game, but I mean, Envy was on his prediction game. Like, he was on top of it, and it was fantastic. But another game full of great predictions was the Tampa Bay Luxrays versus the Florida Gators. Gator bring in Diggersby, Komala, Latios, Heatran, Hawlucha, and Whimsicott, while Mono brought his Greninja, Zygarde 50, Jirachi, Roserade, Mantine, and that Buzzwole. Alright, so let me go ahead and say this. Gator was really good at keeping the momentum in his favor, constantly U-turning with Whimsicott and Komala. Really making sure keep things going in his favor, making Mono hard switch, and it ended up doing well for him. It slowed down Mono, but in the end, it ultimately didn't do much for him as far as keeping the win up. Roserade setting up Spike's early game was and ended up being crucial for Mono's game because Gator did not spin them away, which was very interesting. Now, granted, with Buzzwole ever present with that roost, Gator was forced to make difficult choices. Does he U-turn to keep the momentum and not allow Buzzwole that free roost? Or does he spin the spikes away, keep the chip damage away from his team, and Buzzwole gets to roost up and then just proceed to flex all over his team? Mantine putting in a lot of good specialty defensive work. Even putting up some scald pressure. Now, something that I forgot to mention during the San Jose versus Ole Ola athletic game. Rotom Wash crippling Vaporeon with a trick in a choice scarf. That the same thing happened here in this game with Latios trick scarfing onto Mantine and getting its leftovers instead. Crippling big bulky waters, like big specially defensive bulky waters with a choice scarf. Trick was a big factor for a lot of games this week. Now Hawlucha, the Hawlucha set was really nice, but that high jump kick miss ended up hurting Gator a lot. Hawlucha killing itself due to missing that high jump kick, especially after it had popped its Citrus Berry. It had the Unburden boost. It had a Sword Stance up. Hawlucha easily could have cleaned through Mono's entire team, but that one high jump kick, that sucked big time. Specs Greninja coming in, Specs Hydro Pump, wrecking shop, making a really good call at the end with Specs Water Shuriken, knowing that he had to get Diggersby within the range in order to take it down, and he didn't take that chance. He just went for the Specs Water Shuriken, taking it down at the end. Mono really playing well during the late game. Jirachi not pulling off as many Iron Head flinch shenanigans as a lot of people would like, but that is the game. RNGesus just wasn't in Jirachi's favor this time, unfortunately, but yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say, Mono really showing why he deserves to be in this league. Joining mid last season and really the only coach rocking out with a full positive record is really just carrying that out. I'm very interested to see how long he can carry it out, but he is doing phenomenally. Although I do see some misplays in the way he is approaching the game, he is playing it, he's still an amazing team builder, amazing battler. He identified a big weakness and brought a Specs Greninja. He really just was playing really, really well on his toes. Gator also a phenomenal battler. I think there was some unfortunate hacks that caused him to kind of get on the back foot over there, but both of them still amazing battlers. I think Gator can jump back into it. He has a great team. He preps really well, so I'm excited to see how these guys could end up doing as they progress. Now, jumping into the next game, we have the Milwaukee Saucebucks up against the Detroit Steelwings. Now, Steve is bringing Licky Licky, Hariyama, Cresselia, Swampert, Mimikyu, and Xurkitree, while Chase is bringing his Crocodile, Sylveon, Tornadus T, Kyurem, Serena, and the Dusknoir. Now, immediately we have a first lead-up matchup with the Swampert and the Crook. Now, both sides of this battle, we got Steve thinking Crook is going to set up the rocks. We have Chase thinking Swampert's going to set up rocks. What happens is Swampert lets out a Scald on the Crocodile as it goes for the knockoff, and that scared me. Turn 1, that scared me because Crook was his win condition in a Scarfed Crook, so getting a burn on the Crook could have been very, very scary, but lucky for Chase that did not happen. He is able to take that thing back in, send out Serena, being a really good check to it. Swampert, actually, Steve predicting going for the Ice Punch, so Steve actually getting some predictions right. This is something you never see, folks. So, yeah, in the beginning, he was able to predict. It didn't do much. Serena was physically defensive with a Rocky Helmet. So Swampert does take some chip damage, which we are going to see is very important as we continue. But as the match goes on, we have some crazy things because the Kyurem was a genius bring. A genius bring. because it was able to set up a sub on the Cresselia. It was specially defensive so that a Moonblast cannot even break that Kyurem sub, and it was able to just toxic that thing down, and that was really, really important. Afterwards, switching out, he goes into the Hariyama, attempts to whirlwind that Kyurem out because he was being very annoying with Roost and Toxic and substitutes, but it turns out Chase just switches out, and that whirlwind ends up bringing out the Tornadus onto the Hariyama, and that just causes a whole lord of problems because Cresselia is super weakened at this point, so it's not having a lot of fun switching into the Hurricanes from Tornadus, and it gets confused, and it doesn't really get any confused hacks because he switches out, but just the problems there are really big. The Cresselia being so low at the beginning of this match was really, really, really huge. Tornadus also bringing Taunt was able to stop any, toxic shenanigans on the Crest, also was able to stop the Licky Licky from clicking Wish. By the way, if the Licky Licky was an Oblivious set, the taunt would not have worked. So hindsight on Steve's part, if he ended up bringing that, it could have sent up a Wish into the Cresselia, and the game could have been a little different. Now, what's really, really, the crucial part of this game, what people are probably going to be talking about, is when the Crook comes in. The Crocodile comes in, it's able to knock out the Cresselia with Knockoff, and now we have Mimikyu in. We have Mimikyu behind a disguise and Crocodile really, really low. Chase says, you know what, I'm just going to let my Crook go. He clicks Knockoff just to get rid of that disguise. He does so, also gets rid of the Life Orb, and Steve clicks Play Rough but misses. Now, that's crucial because in the end, we're going to see that Crook is going to be able to 6-0 Steve, but it's also not that crucial because at the same time, let's look at what would happen if Crook wasn't there. If Crook was no longer there, how would Chase go about winning? Well, Tornadus had Tailwind, and Sylveon was Choice Specs. Now, without Cresselia, I really don't see any switch-ins to a Choice Specs Hyper Voice. Not only that, but the Kyurem was still relatively healthy, and took less than half from a Dazzling Gleam on the Xurkitree. Xurkitree did not have any boosting moves, it was just 252, and it did, I'm looking at the calc right now, 41 to 47%. So it is doing less than half, no matter what the scenario is, and Kyurem is able to 2-KO with the Ice Beam, with the defensive investment as we see in Steve's team builder. So although it looks like that Crocodile, missing the Play Rough was really, really big, I personally, as an analyst, think that Chase would have won regardless. But let's just keep going. As the match progresses, we have Hariyama coming in, the Serena really walling that thing down as it clicks Close Combat. The Toxic is able to help on that thing, but once the Serena clicks Dropkick, not only lowers the attack of the Hariyama, but it's -2 defenses because of the Close Combats. Crocodile is able to come in, click Earthquake, and that is it for Steve. No switch-ins, and that is a 6-0. Well, it's a 5-0, but 6 kills from that mighty Crocodile. But what do you think of this sweep?
The sweep was fantastic. Chase really playing with Crocodile well, knocking off during crucial times. Breaking the disguise on Mimikyu was crucial. Now, not even Mimikyu missing Play Rough. That sucked. Don't get me wrong, that did suck for Battler X. But my favorite part of that match was Kyurem was out-cressing a Cresselia. Sitting behind a substitute, getting some nice toxic buildup, roosting. It was pulling off Cresselia's role better than Cresselia was.
What?
Regardless, the sweep was fantastic. Chase did really well with playing with Serena, keeping it, preventing the priority that Steve could have had. So that was a blatant sweep. It was rough to watch, but regardless, the next match we're going to talk about is the Free State Torcats versus the San Francisco Arcaniners. Duncan bringing Celebi, Weavile, Granbull, Landorus Incarnate, Alolan Marowak, and Keldeo, while George brought Mew, Garchomp, Togekiss, Drapion, Suicune, and Raikou. Now, the first thing I'm going to make note of is George's set for Mew. It's not uncommon to see a zero attack Mew, but a light clay dual screening Mew with bulk up baton pass. Interesting. Not something you see every day. And he had great plans for it. Unfortunately, it didn't get to do everything that he wanted it to. Drapion 1v1ing a Weavile. Not necessarily killing it, but managing to stand up to all of its moves, including a full-on Z Sub-Zero Slammer. That was impressive. Now, Drapion was physically offensive. It's very bulky. Well, not super bulky, but just bulky enough to give problems to Weavile. Toxic Spikes. Drapion setting up Toxic Spikes was crucial in this game. Getting poisoning almost every member of Duncan's team, constantly wearing it down. Granted, it wasn't toxic level, but everyone being poisoned really hurt Duncan, made the long game very difficult for him. Togekiss coming in with a scarf and just air slashing everything to Kingdom Come. Not getting too many flinch hexes, but getting just enough and dealing more than enough damage to wear out some very crucial parts, like wearing down the Weavile, wearing down the Celebi. Also, Landorus going down to Togekiss in turn 2. Not every day do you see a Togekiss 1v1 and take down a Landorus Incarnate. But offensive Suicune, not something you see a lot, but the Calm Mind 3 attack set that George was bringing, the EVs that he had invested in it had just enough natural bulk that he could take some hits fast enough that he could speed creep a lot of the slower threats, and bringing good enough coverage, Surf, Signal Beam, Extra Sensory to hit a good chunk of Duncan's team. Now Garchomp unfortunately didn't get to see a whole lot of action. It had great potential, especially paired up with the Mew. Garchomp still coming in and doing nice work. But Drapion, definitely the MVP of this match, taking a lot of hits and dropping those toxic spikes that Duncan just had no answer for and just couldn't get rid of, and it definitely wore him out in the long run.
Yeah, I have to say, I agree with every point you made. You made some great points over there. I agree, the Mew was such a weird set, and I was hoping to see it work. It was able to pull off the Reflect and the Bulk Up, but and it did some work in that sense with the Togekiss, but because Togekiss wasn't physically offensive, the Bulk Up wasn't so incredible on the offensive side, but the defense was really, really nice. Played with the Drapion well. Duncan kind of on the back foot, but overall a really, really good game. And speaking of good games, we're gonna jump right now into probably one of my favorite games of this week and of all time. I love this game. It is the Philadelphia Scissors up against the Borussia Donphan Chimpak, bringing Dugtrio, Azumarill, Kyurem Black, Thundurus Incarnate, the Fortress, and the Volcanion. Lars is bringing his Magearna, Nihilego, Latias, Rotom Heat, Primarina, and Lucario. Now, right off the bat, when you look at the team Dugtrio poses a huge threat for Lars, because not only can it trap and, not OHKO, but can do a lot of damage to the Magearna and kill it once it's a little lower. It can OHKO the Nihilego and OHKO the Lucario. So it posed a huge threat and could trap half of his team. Lars did plan for it really well. Nihilego was able to carry the Shed Shell this week and switch out on the Arena Trap. Lucario holding the Shuka, and Magearna just being scarfed and generally bulky. We'll talk about that Choice Scarf later on in the game, of course. But turn 1, we have a freeze on the Primarina. Now, the reason I want to mention this, although it doesn't seem too big, is it is big, because the Primarina was frozen and forced to go for a Scald. For those of you who don't know, Scald is able to thaw you out, unlike any other move. So it was forced to click Scald on the freeze from Kyurem Black's Ice Beam. Now, Chimp knew that. He took advantage of the fact that his Primarina was probably carrying Scald and switched into the Volcanion. And of course, Primarina did go for the Scald, and it ended up taking no damage because of the Water Absorb. Now, why is that important? It's important because later on, the Rotom is able to go for the Volt Switch on that Volcanion, do massive damage, but not enough. Like, it lived on a sliver of HP, and the potential Moonblast damage, or really any other coverage move that Primarina could have gone for, would have made the game very, very different. So, Volcanion is able to live, and that was a little bit unfortunate on that end, but hey, that's what happens. Volcanion didn't put like an incredible amount of work in. It did put in a lot of work, but that was a little bit unfortunate. Chimp was a bit nervous this game if you had the chance to watch his side of the match, and mispredicted on the Latias's attack by going into the Kyurem Black on the predicted T-Bolt from the Latias. Instead, Latias is an expert belt set and goes for the Dragon Pulse, being able to go through Kyurem Black's Bon Berry and 2-hit KO with the Dragon Pulse, getting rid of a huge potential win con on Chimp's team. And that was really, really big. I think that was more Chimp just being a little bit nervous in that game. You saw how, nervous he was kind of all over the place. He still played a good game, but he was definitely nervous, and you could see that. Magearna was very close to a sweet late game, but we do have sort of misplays that we're going to be talking about. Now, the two main misplays is Chimp should have clicked knockoff with his Azumarill. So let me paint the picture for you just in case you weren't able to catch this match. We have the Magearna with a Choice Scarf, spamming its Dazzling Gleam, and Azumarill does have an Assault Vest. It is able to live one Dazzling Gleam. Chimp was having a lot of problems with his calcs. I don't think he really realized that, and just went for the Waterfall and the Aqua Jet. Now, if Chimp did go for the knockoff, he would have been able to get rid of Magearna's Choice Scarf, and then Dugtrio can come in and kill with Earthquake. Now, this is where the misplay on Lars' side comes in. He did not maximize his speed on Magearna, and did not outspeed the Dugtrio even if it had the Choice Scarf. So Lars, thinking on that, if you watched his game, is that his Magearna was set to speed creep Lars' fastest Mon, which is the Tornadus. Now, because of that, Dugtrio, is much faster than the Tornadus, so Magearna was not able to outspeed a max speed Dugtrio, and Chimp just brought a max speed, max attack Dugtrio. Now, in hindsight, you have to realize that Dugtrio is very frail, and there's really no point in putting any defensive EVs. It's nice, but you don't need to. You're better off, playing safe and going max EVs in the speed. But Lars decided to, predict a little bit more and try to take advantage of extra EVs on the Magearna and only outspeed his fastest Mon in Tornadus. So those two misplays ended up costing Lars the match ultimately. Chimp getting saved. He should have clicked knockoff, but luckily Lars was not able to put the prediction game to place, and sadly was not able to outspeed the Dugtrio. So Chimp was redeemed, got a second chance, still in the game even after that misclick, in my opinion. But this was a phenomenal game on both sides. You have great plays if you sit down and watch these matches. Great plays. It's so interesting to see the mindsets of both of these battlers. Some other things I guess I can mention here is the Thundurus. We have the Z Wild Charge doing a lot of damage to the Lucario. I don't think Lucario would have survived the regular Wild Charge, but if it did, that Z Wild Charge definitely came in handy. But it was a really cool game to watch. I can't say how much I love this game, but I want to hear what you have to say, Spastic.
Physical Thundurus Incarnate. Not something you see every day. Bringing the U-turn instead of the Volt Switch really helped. Keep the momentum going, get the maximum amount of damage, especially against the Rotom Heat. Kyurem Black going down was very unfortunate. It was running Earth Power, so it could have easily taken out the Rotom Heat, as Terravolt would have negated Levitate. So Kyurem Black really had the potential to tear through Lars' entire team with Earth Power, Ice Beam, and Fusion Bolt. Like, not even bringing Outrage, just those coverage moves alone could have taken out most, if not all, of Lars' team. And Roost just for extra recovery. Volcanion, getting a nice flame charge up and then trying to keep up the offensive pressure. Nasty Plot Lucario, interesting idea, didn't get to go off as well as Lars would have wanted. Very interesting sets being brought to this game. But yeah, a Dugtrio, it got a little bit of a buff from Gen 6 to Gen 7, and it's proving even more just how dangerous it is in League format. But the final game we're going to talk about is perhaps the most heartbreaking. Because it is the most heartbreaking, yet it is simultaneously, in my opinion, the most exciting game this entire season. We have the New Orleans Pelippers up against the Utah Jasmine. John bringing Porygon Z, Sneasel, Milotic, Gudra, Uxie, and Tapu Bulu, while Cooper, in his final GBA game, bringing Manaphy, Zapdos, Reuniclus, Scrafty, Klefki, and Golbat. Oh boy, there's a lot to be said about this game. For starters, let's talk about how good Cooper was at getting all sorts of chip damage on John's team. Klefki managing to get up 3 sets of spikes. Zapdos getting off a couple of key toxics. Also, Cooper bringing the full incense on Klefki with the intent to switcheroo it onto one of John's mons. It still ended up getting the effect that he wanted, although John ended up doing it for him by tricking Porygon Z's Choice Scarf onto Klefki, which with Prankster spikes made it redundant, but regardless, there was a lot of Choice Scarf trickery this week. But again, Klefki getting up 3 sets of spikes, and John not having a way to get rid of them hurt a lot. Racking up all that residual damage on all of his mons except for the Uxie, just levitating above it all. But Uxie was just a great defensive bulky mon. Even though it was poisoned, it still managed to it managed to soak up a lot of key hits. It managed to keep Reuniclus on his toes. Milotic just seems to have a grudge against Dragon Dance. It's we've already seen it use Haze repeatedly against Dance for Alligator a couple weeks ago, and then we see it repeatedly use Haze against Scrafty Dragon Dancing. And Milotic just doesn't like dancing dragons, so get out of here. Gudra going down really hurt because Reuniclus, Zapdos, and Manaphy were all very big special attackers on Coop's team, especially with Cooper bringing an offensive Reuniclus, Regenerator, and Life Orb. Reuniclus could have done a lot of work. It didn't do as much as Coop had intended. Manaphy going down before it could even fire off its use its ICMZ. That was also unfortunate. Porygon Z putting on a lot of offensive pressure. I know I say that a lot, and I'm sorry, but it really was. Even though it only got 1 kill, try it. Choice Scarf managed to make it outspeed everything else on Cooper's team. Try Attack, boosted by adaptability, hurts a lot. But again, when it tricked onto Klefki and it got the full incense, John wasn't sure what it did. And originally, it did seem like a very Cooper thing to do, a very gag thing. This was his last game, so he figured, yeah, Cooper's going to have some fun. Little did he know that Porygon Z is going to be super slowed down, which ended up costing it its life. Tapu Bulu continuously bringing in that grassy terrain, keeping its own health up, but Cooper managing to make use of it. Zapdos using Roost, Golbat using Roost, get that little bit of extra additional recovery from the grassy terrain once it roosted. But let's also talk about John's ability to stall out Cooper's Trick Room. Reuniclus could have done a lot more work with Trick Room up. Even Golbat could have been handy, even though it's not that slow. Scrafty didn't necessarily need a DD at that point, but he had multiple options. But John continued to stall out the Reuniclus in the Trick Room, ultimately making it not that useful. Golbat being so bloody bulky. Also, Cooper keeping the Eviolite on it until the very end. Knowing that Uxie was coming in to knock it off, knowing that Sneasel could have knocked it off. So he kept that EV light on the Golbat, knowing how crucial it was going to be. And in the end, it really was. Sneasel coming in, though, young Thuggin, putting in a lot of offensive work, getting 3 kills, and doing a lot of good work at the end. Taking down Scrafty. That flinch on the Icicle Crash was key for John. Yeah, taking down Scrafty was big, because otherwise that high jump kick would have blown Sneasel to Kingdom Come. But Golbat, using the Heat Wave on Golbat onto the Sneasel, yeah, it could have easily taken out with a Brave Bird, but Cooper going for style points. I mean, it worked out for him. And finishing out that game with style, Golbat hanging on by a thread, a 1-0 victory for Cooper's last game. I don't think we could have asked for a better game, especially between two people who respect each other so much. Like, you hear John just constantly giving it up during his game, during his team builder. Cooper giving it up to John the entire time. Just, it was everything about this game was fantastic.
Amazing. I love this game. I want to take this opportunity very quickly to mention that, as we round out this week's games, as analysts and as people, we are watching this game, but we're not going to catch every little thing. So again, if you guys see something or notice something that was impactful for the games that we forgot to mention, go ahead and let us know. I'm sure Spastic can agree that we will read your comments. We love hearing your feedback, because your feedback is analysis, and we want to give you guys the best analysis. But running into this game, as Spastic mentioned very well, something I just want to correct you on, Spastic, is the Golbat was burned, so the Brave Bird might not have killed that Sneasel. So having that Heat Wave was such a clutch move in the end. Milotic getting, I think, every single Scald burn that it sent out. Every Scald got its burn, so I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure almost every single Scald got a burn. So that is some lucky hacks. But Uxie, I want to mention, was great utility in this game. The rocks, the toxic, the U-turn momentum, along with Milotic, really nice. Just a lot of back and forth this game between the Uxie, the birds, Bulu, Porygon Z putting on a lot of pressure, even with that full incense, which I thought was bloody hilarious. I thought that was hilarious. I thought that was the funniest thing. Could have easily put on what's that, the lagging tail? No, he put on that full incense, because you have no clue what that is. So that was amazing. I loved watching that. But yeah, Klefki getting all the spikes up, really important. Scarf Bulu getting rid of the threat in Manaphy, really important. It was a very scary Calm Mindset, 3 attacks, Sub-Zero Slammer. So getting rid of that thing with the Bulu, very nice. Like you mentioned, Haze Milotic, clutch against that DD Scrafty. And lastly, Sneasel Choice Banded, last minute, spamming Icicle Crash, did not miss. It flinched, but then when it came in against the Golbat, it was able to live. Heat Wave connected, no flinch, and that was the end of the game. Amazing. Amazing. I have no words. I can't wait to see John perform this well in the future. I mean, even though he lost, he performed so well. And props to Coop. He will be missed. He's an amazing battler. We do have Necrostevo coming in to replace him. Also, I believe I've heard is an amazing battler, so I'm very excited to see him come in. Also a fellow breeder like Coop is, so I have respect for him already, and I'm excited to see him take the team that Cooper geniusly put together. But let's round out this weekly recap, as we are running a little late. We have the conference breakdown. Ole Ola, Pony, Millimele, and Akala looking like crazy divisions right now. Still, as we're 4 weeks into it, we have the Pittsburgh Paraditas with no wins and the Tampa Bay Luxuries with no losses. Paraditas obviously have now the lowest differential with -13, and although the Tampa Bay Luxuries have not lost a single match, it's the San Francisco Arcaniners that have the top differential, and tied with the second to top is the Detroit Steelwings and the Tampa Bay Luxuries. So we have oh my god, we have crazy differentials and divisions. We have Sawsbucks, Giants, two very strong battlers still sitting at the bottom. I'm looking to see them do a little better. We have newcomers from last season like Chimp and MV right at the top of their divisions. It looks like some crazy divisions. We still have a few people going with a 0 differential, just like Dan and Cooper with 0 differentials, which I always find funny. But we have a really cool division breakdown right here. We are, I believe, a third way through the season, coming up on week 4. So as much as I want to say things can change, we are coming close to how the divisions are kind of going to look. Things are going to start tightening up. These are going to be how the teams look like. So although things, of course, can change, we're still very early on. We're not extremely early on. They still have to really put in a lot more work now if the people at the bottom want to move to the top. But yeah, what do you think, Spastic?
I think the Melee conference is, as of right now, looking really, really nice. It's looking the best in my opinion because Cooper and Chase both have positive differential, well, 0 differential, but they have good wins under their belts. Even Tom's at 2-2 with a positive 3 differential. It's looking like a really good division. Yeah, unfortunately, Gio sitting at a 1-3 with a negative 11 differential. It sucks. He's a good battler. He puts a lot of thought into his prep. Occasionally he does misclick, but everyone does. I am interested to see who comes out on top in the pony division. It's George v Mono at this point. Mono undefeated. How long is that going to last? George with a better differential than Mono, but he has that one loss, so the fact that anyone has gone undefeated this deep into the season is astounding, really, given the caliber of players that we're seeing this season, the caliber of team building, the teams that were drafted. And like you said, it's unfortunate. We're seeing 3 veterans at the bottoms of their divisions. Tup, Battler X, and Gio at the bottoms of their divisions. Now, I really do hope that they can pull it out. It's not unheard of. They can rise through the ranks. Maybe not get to the top, given how late into the season we are. But regardless, it's shaping up to be really nice. I'm also really curious to see how Necro does with Cooper's team. I've heard he's fantastic. If Cooper has trust in him, I'm going to have trust in him, and we'll see what happens. Although I do have one stipulation. If he ever brings Scrafty and it does die, then whenever he edits his video, he has to put on the Aaron whenever Scrafty dies. That is a requirement. If you're going to take Cooper's team, you've got to keep with Cooper's theme. But looking at the kill leaders. Oh my god, kill leaders real quick. Cobalion still sitting at the top, but Crocodile right on its heels. Cobalion only having 1 more kill than Crocodile. But again, both Mons from a sweep that Chase pulled off. Epic sweeps. Cobalion with the sword stance and the rock polish setup. Crocodile with the Moxie scarfing. Chase is really, whenever Chase is in his zone and he's getting those sweeps up, he is in it and he is very difficult to stop. Volcanion, 5 kills, only 1 death. Very nice differential. He could very well rise. Alolan Muck, Suicune, Milotic, Hawlucha, Terrakion, Conkeldurr, and Landorus. Landorus and Conkeldurr, even Terrakion, no strangers to the top of the kill list. Suicune and Milotic, not necessarily offensive mods, so it's interesting to see them not only in the top 10, but higher than major offensive threats like Conk and Lando. We've seen Hawlucha do a lot of good work, and I hope it continues to put in that amazing work that we've seen it do. But I don't know, there's not much else to say about that. What do you think?
Yeah, I've got to say, looking back at those top kills, the Detroit, Steel Wings, and Chase, having 2 Pokemon at the number 1 and number 2 spot is incredible. I want to be transparent with you guys the same way Burke was, saying that he is in Tom's front office, I am in Chase's, and I can say that I am personally very proud of these 2 members, that they're great offensive and can also be defensive threats. So seeing them pull off such offensive sweeps, is really, really impressive. George was advertising Suicune as an offensive mon on his roster this team. He really wants to show that it can be offensive, and clearly he is doing that. It has the number 5 spot, so Very, very impressed to see him do so well with that. Alolan Muck, just because of the Trick Room and it's just a great defensive mon that can put on offensive pressure as well. I'm scared to see my Milotic up here. It's not something you're usually going to see up here, but again, fighting types like the Hawlucha, Terrakion, and Conkeldurr, absolute beasts. Landorus at the very last spot, etching it right in there without the sheer force, but still up there. So an amazing league leaders, an amazing conference breakdown we had, and an amazing set of matches. I mean, we're coming close to an hour on this weekly recap, which is quite unusual, but this week was an amazing set of games. I was so impressed by every single match, and I'm very excited to continue down the line and see how these matchups continue, because if it's anything like this week, they're going to be a lot of fun. But that's pretty much going to be it for the weekly recaps of Week 4. Catch us next week on Wednesdays for the Week 5 weekly recap for another exciting round of battles. But that's going to be it. We will see you guys next time.